Montana Territory, 1882. The rain was relentless, turning the station platform into a sea of mud as the train hissed to a stop at Clearwater Junction. Nora Randall clutched her carpetbag with one hand and a crumpled advertisement with the other, wondering if coming west had been the gravest mistake of her 22 years. Last stop before Billings. Clearwater Junction. 20-minute water stop, the conductor bellowed, swinging down from the train. Nora took a deep breath and stepped onto the wooden platform, her boots immediately sinking into half an inch of mud that had washed onto the boards. The journey from Boston had been long and uncomfortable, but the promise of a new life, a husband, perhaps children, certainly stability, had sustained her through every jostling mile. The advertisement, now damp from her nervous palm, had seemed like Providence when she'd found it in the newspaper 3 months ago. Respectable rancher seeks God-fearing woman of good character as wife. Must be willing to work hard and help build a prosperous future. Fare provided upon acceptance of correspondence. William Fletcher had written her thoughtful letters. He seemed kind in his correspondence, if somewhat reserved. At 34, he was older than she, but that suggested stability. He'd sent her train fare after their third exchange of letters, and now here she was, thousands of miles from the only home she'd ever known, waiting for a man she'd never met. The rain plastered her traveling dress to her body. She stepped beneath the small overhang of the station, scanning the few faces for someone who might be her intended husband. "Miss Randall?" A gruff voice called from behind her. She turned, hope rising. A man in a wide-brimmed hat stood there, water streaming off the brim. His face was weathered, his beard peppered with gray, and he was at least 60 years old. "Yes, I'm Nora Randall," she replied, trying to hide her surprise. William Fletcher had not mentioned his age, but surely he wasn't this old? "Ezra Johnson," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Mr. Fletcher asked me to fetch you. The wagon's just yonder." Relief washed over her. This wasn't her intended, merely someone sent to retrieve her. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson," she said, accepting his help with her bag. The wagon ride was miserable. The rain continued unabated, and though Mr. Johnson had provided a length of oilcloth for her to shelter beneath, water still found its way down her collar and into her boots. The road, if it could be called such, was a rutted trail that pitched the wagon from side to side. "Far yet?" she asked after nearly an hour of bumping along. "Another hour, maybe more in this weather," Ezra replied, eyes fixed on the muddy track ahead. "Ain't the Fletcher place, though? We're heading to the Westbrook Ranch." Nora frowned. "I believe there's been a mistake. I'm to marry Mr. William Fletcher." Ezra shook his head. "No, ma'am. Mr. Isaac Westbrook sent for you. I've worked for him these past 15 years. A cold dread settled in Nora's stomach that had nothing to do with the rain. "No, that can't be right. I have the letters right here." She fumbled with her reticule, withdrawing the packet of correspondence, carefully wrapped in oilskin. "Don't matter what letters you got, miss. Mr. Westbrook sent me to fetch his mail-order bride from the 3:15 train, and that's you." Nora's mind raced. "But the conductor called Clearwater Junction. The letters say I was to arrive at Clearwater Station." Ezra shrugged. "Clearwater Station's another 50 miles east. This here's the junction." The realization hit her like a physical blow. She'd gotten off at the wrong stop. Her intended husband, William Fletcher, was waiting for her 50 miles away, while she was being driven to the home of a stranger who was expecting a different bride altogether. "We have to go back," she said, panic rising in her voice. "This is all a terrible mistake. Can't go back, miss. Not in this weather. Road to the east will be washed out by now. Flash floods come quick in these parts." "But I can't. I don't." Words failed her. "Best you explain it to Mr. Westbrook," Ezra said. "He's a fair man." The rain seemed to be mocking her now, drumming against the oilcloth like malicious laughter. Nora squeezed her eyes shut, offering a silent prayer. God had guided her this far, she reminded herself. Surely he hadn't brought her across the continent only to abandon her now. The Westbrook Ranch appeared first as a golden glow of windows through the gray curtain of rain. As they drew closer, Nora could make out a substantial 2-story home, larger than she'd expected, with a broad covered porch and smoke curling from 2 chimneys. Several outbuildings stood nearby, and a large barn was visible just beyond. This was no humble homestead, but a successful operation. Whatever else could be said about Isaac Westbrook, he was prosperous. Ezra pulled the team to a halt beneath a covered area near the house. "Wait here," he instructed, jumping down from the wagon. "I'll let Mr. Westbrook know we've arrived." Alone in the wagon, Nora considered fleeing, but the thought was absurd. She had no horse, no knowledge of the territory, and nowhere to go in a downpour that showed no signs of abating. Her only option was to face this Isaac Westbrook, explain the misunderstanding, and hope he was indeed the fair man Ezra claimed him to be. The front door opened, and a tall figure emerged, following Ezra across the yard. As they approached, Nora could see he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps in his early 30s. He wore no hat, and the rain quickly plastered his dark hair to his head. A neatly trimmed beard framed a square jaw, and his eyes, even at a distance, were startlingly blue against his tanned skin. "Miss Randall?" His voice was deep but gentle. "I'm Isaac Westbrook. Welcome to Elk Valley Ranch." He offered a hand to help her down, and Nora had little choice but to accept it. His grip was strong, steadying her as her feet found the muddy ground. "Mr. Westbrook," she began, "there's been a terrible misunderstanding." Soaked to the bone," he interrupted. "Let's get you inside by the fire. Explanations can wait until you're warm and dry." Before she could protest, he'd taken her carpet bag from Ezra and was guiding her toward the house with a light touch at her elbow. The porch offered blessed relief from the rain, and Nora took a moment to wipe her feet on the mat before stepping inside. The interior of the home was as impressive as its exterior suggested. A large fireplace dominated the main room, with comfortable-looking furniture arranged before it. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes. A staircase curved upward to the second floor, and doorways led to what appeared to be a dining room and kitchen. "Mrs. Hollister," Isaac called. A plump, gray-haired woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "So this is her then?" she asked, eyeing Nora with frank curiosity. "This is Miss Randall," Isaac confirmed. "She needs dry clothes and something warm to drink. Perhaps you could show her upstairs?" "Of course. Come along, dear." Mrs. Hollister gestured for Nora to follow her. "Mr. Westbrook," Nora tried again. "I really must explain. Later," he said firmly, but not unkindly. "Get yourself settled first." Seeing no alternative, Nora followed Mrs. Hollister upstairs to a comfortable bedroom with a large brass bed and a small sitting area near the window. A fire already burned in a small fireplace, and steam rose from a copper bath set before it. "Mr. Westbrook had me prepare as soon as Ezra rode out," Mrs. Hollister explained. "Lucky thing, too, with this weather. You'll catch your death otherwise." She helped Nora out of her sodden clothing, clucking sympathetically over the state of her traveling dress. "This will need a good pressing before it's wearable again," she said, hanging it near the fire. "I've laid out some things that should fit you well enough for now." The bath was heavenly, washing away the grime of travel and the chill of the rain. Mrs. Hollister had added lavender oil to the water, and the scent was soothing to Nora's frayed nerves. By the time she dried off and dressed in the borrowed clothing, a simple but well-made blue dress that was only slightly loose at the waist, she felt much more composed. Mrs. Hollister returned with a tray bearing a pot of tea and a plate of sandwiches. "Mr. Westbrook says to come down when you're ready, but there's no hurry. Take your time and have something to eat first." Nora thanked her and sat at the small table, forcing herself to eat despite her churning stomach. She needed to think clearly. Once she explained the situation to Mr. Westbrook, what then? The prospect of being stranded in an unfamiliar place with no means to reach her intended husband was daunting. When she could delay no longer, Nora made her way back downstairs. Isaac Westbrook was seated in an armchair by the fire, reading. He stood as she entered the room. "Better?" he asked, gesturing for her to take a seat opposite him. "Yes, thank you." She settled on the edge of the chair, hands clasped in her lap. "Mr. Westbrook, I must tell you that you're not Margaret Thompson," he finished for her. Nora blinked in surprise. "You know?" He smiled slightly. "Ezra explained while you were upstairs. You're Nora Randall, bound for Clearwater Station to marry William Fletcher, but you got off at the wrong stop." Relief washed over her. "Yes, exactly. I'm so terribly sorry for the confusion. No need to apologize. These things happen." He leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. "The difficulty is what to do now. The road east will indeed be impassable for several days after this rain. The creek floods the low pass every time. Several days? Nora echoed, dismayed. I'm afraid so. And there's no telegraph at the junction. We'd have to send someone all the way to Billings to get a message to Fletcher. I see. Nora's mind raced. Perhaps I could hire someone to take me to Clearwater Station once the road is clear? Isaac nodded. That could be arranged, certainly. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay here. We have plenty of room, and Mrs. Hollister would appreciate the female company. You're very kind, Mr. Westbrook, but I wouldn't want to impose. What about Miss Thompson? Won't she be arriving soon? A shadow crossed his face. I received a telegram 3 days ago. Miss Thompson has changed her mind. She's not coming. Oh, Nora wasn't sure what to say. I'm sorry to hear that. He waved a hand dismissively. It's for the best, I'm sure. In any case, you're welcome to remain here until arrangements can be made to get you to Fletcher. Thank you, Nora said quietly. May I ask, what will you do now? About your bride, I mean. Isaac stared into the fire for a long moment. I haven't decided. Perhaps it's not meant to be. There was something in his voice, a quiet resignation that tugged at Nora's heart. Before she could respond, Mrs. Hollister appeared in the doorway. Supper's ready, she announced. Nothing fancy, just beef stew and biscuits, but it'll warm you up proper. The meal was delicious, far better than the sparse fare Nora had subsisted on during her journey. Isaac proved to be a thoughtful host, asking about her trip west and her life in Boston, carefully avoiding any mention of William Fletcher or the awkwardness of her situation. You have a beautiful home, Nora said as they finished their meal. Have you lived here long? All my life, Isaac replied. My father built this house when he first claimed the land, though I've added to it over the years. The original cabin is now my study. He gestured toward a door off the main room. The ranch has been in the family for 30 years now. Do you run it alone? Ezra helps manage things. We have 8 other hands who work the cattle, more during roundup and branding. Mrs. Hollister keeps the house, as you've seen. It must be a great deal of work. A slight smile curved his lips. It is, but it's good work. Meaningful. After supper, Isaac excused himself to check on the livestock, leaving Nora to help Mrs. Hollister with the dishes. He's a good man, the older woman said as they worked. Too much alone, though. That's why he sent for a bride, you know? Time he had a family of his own. It's unfortunate about Miss Thompson, Nora said carefully. Mrs. Hollister snorted. Probably for the best. Third one to back out. She was. Always some excuse at the last minute. I think the idea of frontier life seems romantic until it comes time to actually get on the train. Third. Nora was startled. He's been disappointed 3 times? Indeed he has. First one got engaged to someone else while corresponding with Mr. Westbrook. Second one made it as far as Billings before turning back east. And now Miss Thompson. Nora felt a pang of sympathy for Isaac. No wonder he'd seemed resigned rather than angry about Miss Thompson's change of heart. That night, lying in the comfortable bed with rain still pattering against the windows, Nora found sleep elusive. Her thoughts kept returning to Isaac Westbrook, the kindness he'd shown her despite his own disappointment, the quiet dignity with which he'd accepted yet another setback. And what of William Fletcher, waiting for her at Clearwater Station? His letters had been pleasant enough, but there had been a certain formality to them, a detachment. He'd written of his ranch and his needs for a wife in practical terms, someone to cook, to keep house, to help with the accounts. Isaac, in just one evening, had shown more warmth than Fletcher had expressed in months of correspondence. It was an unsettling realization. Lord, she whispered into the darkness, I don't understand your plan in all this, but I trust you have one. Please guide me. Morning broke with surprising brightness. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a washed-clean world sparkling in the sunlight. Nora dressed in her own clothes, now dried and pressed, and made her way downstairs to find Isaac and Mrs. Hollister already at breakfast. Good morning, Isaac greeted her. I hope you slept well. Very well, thank you, Nora replied, taking the seat he pulled out for her. I've been out checking the roads, he said as Mrs. Hollister placed a plate of eggs and bacon before Nora. As I feared, the East Road is completely flooded. It will be at least 4 days before it's passable. I see, Nora said, trying to hide her disappointment. I should write to Mr. Fletcher. He'll be worried when I don't arrive. Ezra's riding to Billings today with the mail. He can send a telegram for you. Thank you. That's very kind. After breakfast, Nora composed a brief message to William Fletcher, explaining the situation and assuring him she would come as soon as the roads permitted. Isaac took the note, promising to give it to Ezra before he left. "What will you do with yourself today?" he asked. "I have some ranch business to attend to, but I should be free by afternoon." "I wouldn't want to be in the way," Nora said quickly. "Perhaps Mrs. Hollister could use some help?" "Nonsense. You're a guest, not a servant. There are books in the study if you like to read, or you could walk around the property if you'd prefer some air. The views are quite lovely after a rain." Left to her own devices, Nora first helped Mrs. Hollister with the breakfast dishes, despite the older woman's protests, then took Isaac's suggestion and explored the ranch grounds. The house sat on a gentle rise, providing a commanding view of the valley below. To the west, mountains rose in a jagged line against the blue sky. Closer at hand, she could see fenced pastures where cattle grazed, a large garden plot beside the house, and various outbuildings that supported the ranch's operations. It was beautiful, she had to admit, different from the crowded streets of Boston or the neat farms of Massachusetts, but beautiful in its wild, open way. She was sitting on the porch, watching clouds drift across the vast sky, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. A rider appeared, pushing his horse at a gallop toward the house. It wasn't Ezra, but a younger man Nora hadn't seen before. Isaac emerged from the barn at the sound, meeting the rider as he reined in his horse. "Jimmy? What's wrong?" Isaac's voice carried clearly in the still air. The young man, barely more than a boy, dismounted in a rush. "Trouble at the north pasture, Mr. Westbrook. That mare you've been watching is down. Trying to foal, but something's wrong. Doc Miller's out at the parson's place with their boy who broke his leg." Isaac nodded grimly. "Saddle my horse. I'll get my kit." He strode toward the house, noticing Nora on the porch. "Miss Randall, I'm sorry, but I have an emergency with one of my horses. I may be gone for some time. Is there anything I can do to help?" The words were out before Nora could consider them. Isaac paused, studying her. "Do you know anything about horses?" "Not about foaling," she admitted, "but I grew up on a farm. I'm not afraid of animals or difficult situations." He seemed to weigh this for a moment. "An extra pair of hands might be useful. Can you ride?" "Yes, though it's been some time. Jimmy can bring a gentle mount for you." "If you're certain?" There was something in his expression, a blend of surprise and cautious appreciation, that decided her. "I'm certain." 20 minutes later, they were riding north, following a well-worn trail that wound through stands of pine and across open meadows. The mare Jimmy had brought for Nora was indeed gentle, responding easily to her commands despite her rusty horsemanship. "You ride well for someone who hasn't been on horseback in a while," Isaac observed as they crested a hill. "My father believed all children should learn to ride, boys and girls alike," Nora explained. "I used to ride every day before we moved to Boston." "Why did your family move?" "My father died when I was 16. The farm was too much for my mother and me to manage alone. My uncle offered us a place in Boston, and my mother found work as a seamstress." "I'm sorry about your father," Isaac said quietly. "It must have been difficult to leave your home." "It was," Nora admitted. "I missed the open spaces, the animals. Even the work, though it was hard." They rode in companionable silence for a time, the only sounds the rhythmic hoofbeats and the occasional call of a bird. Finally, they crested a rise, and Nora could see a group of men gathered near a stand of trees below. "There," Isaac pointed. "That's where they've been keeping the pregnant mares." As they approached, one of the ranch hands came forward to take their horses. "She's over there, boss," he said, gesturing toward a bay mare lying on her side beneath a large pine. "Been trying for hours, from the look of things." Isaac dismounted quickly, grabbing a leather bag from his saddle. "What's her condition?" "Exhausted. Tried to help herself up once or twice, but couldn't manage it." Nora slid from her own horse and followed Isaac to where the mare lay. The animal's sides heaved with effort, her coat dark with sweat. Her eyes rolled with fear and pain as they approached. Isaac knelt beside her, murmuring softly as he ran experienced hands over her distended belly. The mare nickered weakly in response. "Easy girl," he soothed. "We're here to help." He glanced up at Nora. "I need to examine her internally to feel the position of the foal. It may not be properly aligned for birth." Nora nodded, understanding. "What can I do?" "Keep her head steady. Talk to her. She knows me, but she's frightened." For the next hour, Nora stayed at the mare's head, stroking her neck and speaking gentle reassurances while Isaac worked to reposition the foal. The ranch hands brought water and blankets, but largely kept their distance, sensing their boss had the situation in hand. "There," Isaac said finally, satisfaction evident in his voice. "The foal was breech, but I've turned it. Now we need to help her push." Together, they encouraged the exhausted mare, Isaac occasionally reaching in to guide the foal's progress. Nora wiped the animal's face with a damp cloth, continuing her litany of soft encouragement. "She's giving up?" Isaac said suddenly, concern etching his features. "She's too tired to push anymore." "No, you're not." Nora addressed the mare firmly, taking the animal's head between her hands. "You've come this far. Your baby needs you to be strong just a little longer." Whether it was her tone or simply a last surge of maternal instinct, the mare gave a mighty heave. Isaac's hands moved quickly, guiding, and suddenly there was a wet, gangly foal sprawled in the grass. "A colt," Isaac announced, immediately clearing the newborn's nose and mouth. "And a fine one at that." The mare raised her head weakly, straining to see her offspring. With gentle hands, Isaac and Nora guided the wobbly foal to his mother's side, where he immediately began to seek milk. "He'll be all right now," Isaac said, sitting back on his heels and watching the pair with evident satisfaction. "And so will she, thanks in part to you." Nora blushed at the praise. "I didn't do much. You did more than you know." He looked at her with new respect. Most city women would have fainted at the sight of birth, let alone been willing to help. "I told you. I grew up on a farm," she reminded him, but she was pleased by his approval nonetheless. They stayed until the mare was on her feet and the foal was nursing strongly, then mounted their horses for the ride back to the ranch house. The sun was low on the horizon by the time they returned, painting the landscape in gold and amber. "I should apologize," Isaac said as they walked their tired mounts toward the barn. "This wasn't how you expected to spend your day, I'm sure." "Don't apologize," Nora replied honestly. "It was invigorating. I've missed this kind of life more than I realized." He studied her, his blue eyes thoughtful. "Fletcher's ranch, is it much like this?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "His letters described it as modest but comfortable. I believe he raises some cattle and grows wheat. Alone. He mentioned a hired man, I think." Nora frowned, trying to recall the details from Fletcher's correspondence. How was it she knew so little about the man she had agreed to marry? Isaac nodded but said nothing more as they reached the barn. He dismounted and came around to help Nora down, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a moment, they stood very close, and Nora was acutely aware of his height, the breadth of his shoulders, the scent of leather and pine that clung to him. Then he stepped back, and the moment passed. "Thank you again for your help today," he said formally. "You're welcome," she replied, suddenly shy. "I enjoyed it, truly." That evening, after they'd washed away the dust and grime of the day, they sat together at supper. Mrs. Hollister had outdone herself with a roast chicken and all the trimmings, apparently pleased by Nora's continued presence in the household. "Jimmy tells me you were a great help with the mare today," Mrs. Hollister said as she served Nora an extra portion of apple cobbler for dessert. "Mr. Westbrook did all the real work," Nora demurred. "I just kept the mare calm." "Don't sell yourself short," Isaac countered. "Your farm background was evident. You have a natural way with animals." "My father raised draft horses," Nora explained. "Not many, just 4 or 5 at a time, but they were his pride. I helped with them from the time I could walk." "Yet you agreed to marry a wheat farmer?" Isaac's question was casual, but his eyes were intent. Nora hesitated. "After my mother died last year, I had few options. My uncle's health is failing, and his son has made it clear I won't be welcome in their home much longer." Mr. Fletcher's advertisement seemed providential. "I see." Isaac's expression was unreadable. "Well, Ezra should return from Billings tomorrow with a reply from Fletcher. Then we can determine next steps." That night, Nora dreamed of the foaling, the fierce struggle, the triumph of new life, and Isaac's strong hands guiding the process. In the dream, when their eyes met over the newborn colt, something passed between them, something warm and electric that made her breath catch. She woke with a start, her heart pounding. It was just a dream, she told herself firmly, a natural result of the day's excitement. It meant nothing. But as she drifted back to sleep, She couldn't help but compare the firm confidence of Isaac Westbrook to the formal, somewhat distant tone of William Fletcher's letters. And she couldn't deny that in just 2 days, she'd come to admire the rancher who had so unexpectedly taken her in. The next morning brought clear skies and a gentle breeze. After breakfast, Isaac invited Nora to accompany him to check on the new mother and foal. "I'd like that," she said, pleased by the invitation. They rode at an easier pace than the day before, taking time to appreciate the landscape. Isaac pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his youth on the ranch, adventures with his father, lessons learned, the gradual expansion of the Westbrook holdings. "Your father sounds like a remarkable man," Nora observed. "He was," Isaac agreed. "Tough, but fair. He taught me everything I know about ranching and a good deal about life besides. He always said a man's word was his bond, and that how you treated those dependent on you, whether animals or people, revealed your true character." "Wise advice," Nora said softly. "What about your father? What was he like?" Nora smiled at the memories. "Gentle, patient. He could calm the most skittish horse with just his voice. He loved poetry and would recite it while we worked. Wordsworth was his favorite. My mother used to tease that he was the most impractical dreamer who ever managed to run a successful farm." "You loved him very much," Isaac observed. "I did. I still do." She glanced at him. "As you must still love your father." "Every day," he acknowledged. "I hear his voice in my head when I'm making decisions, especially difficult ones." They found the mare and foal in good health, the colt already steady on his legs and frisking about his mother. Isaac watched them with evident satisfaction. "What will you name him?" Nora asked. Isaac looked surprised. "I hadn't thought about it. We don't usually name the livestock unless they're special in some way." "He's special," Nora insisted. "He fought so hard to be born." A slow smile spread across Isaac's face. "You're right. He deserves a name." He considered for a moment. "How about Triumph?" "Perfect," Nora agreed, watching the colt prance about his mother. On their return to the ranch, they found Ezra waiting for them, his expression grave. "Mr. Westbrook, Miss Randall," he greeted them. "I've returned from Billings." "Did you send my telegram?" Nora asked eagerly. Ezra nodded. "Yes, ma'am. And I got a reply." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, hesitating before handing it to her. Nora opened it with fingers that suddenly trembled. The message was brief. "Regret to inform Miss Randall stop have married another stop impossible to honor arrangement stop Fletcher." She read it twice, unable at first to comprehend the words. William Fletcher had married someone else? How was that possible? They had an agreement, an understanding. She had traveled thousands of miles based on that understanding. "Miss Randall?" Isaac's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you all right?" She looked up, dazed. "He's married. Mr. Fletcher has married someone else." Isaac took the telegram from her unresisting fingers, reading it quickly. His jaw tightened. "The scoundrel." "There's more," Ezra said reluctantly. "I asked around in Billings. Seems Fletcher's been advertising for a bride in several newspapers, corresponding with multiple women. When one arrived at Clearwater Station 2 weeks ago, ahead of schedule, he married her straight away." 2 weeks ago? Nora echoed. "But he was still writing to me then. His last letter said how eagerly he awaited my arrival." Isaac's expression darkened further. "The man is without honor," he said flatly. "Ezra, would you take Miss Randall's horse? I think she'd better ride with me." Nora didn't protest as Isaac helped her mount his horse, then swung up behind her. She was grateful for his solid presence as they rode back to the ranch house, her mind still reeling from the telegram's contents. She was stranded in Montana territory with no fiancé, no home, and dwindling funds. What was she to do now? Back at the ranch house, Mrs. Hollister took one look at Nora's face and ushered her to a chair, pressing a cup of tea into her hands. "There now, drink this. Whatever's happened can't be as bad as all that." But it was. As the reality of her situation sank in, Nora felt panic rising. She had no family to return to in Boston, no prospects there beyond possible employment as a shop girl or seamstress. Yet how could she remain here, dependent on the charity of a man she barely knew? "Miss Randall," Nora, Isaac said, kneeling beside her chair. "I know this is a shock, but please believe me when I say you're welcome to stay here as long as you need while you decide what to do next." His kindness nearly undid her. "I can't impose on you that way," she said, fighting tears. "You've already been far too generous." It's not an imposition, he insisted. In fact, he hesitated, then continued. In fact, I have a proposition for you, but it can wait until you've had time to collect yourself. A proposition? Nora looked at him warily. What sort of proposition? Isaac stood, suddenly looking less certain. It's just, I've seen how good you are with the horses. How at home you seem here already. And Mrs. Hollister isn't getting any younger. She could use help managing the house. Are you offering me employment? Nora asked, surprised. I'm offering you options, he clarified. A place here, if you want it. As a housekeeper, or to help with the horses, or both. Until you decide what you truly want to do. It was more than she had expected, far more generous than she deserved from a virtual stranger. Yet the thought of staying at Elk Valley Ranch, of working with the horses again, was undeniably appealing. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Say you'll consider it, Isaac replied. That's all I ask for now. I will. Consider it, I mean. Thank you. That evening, after a quiet supper, Isaac invited Nora to join him in his study. The room, as he had mentioned, was the original cabin, now incorporated into the larger house. It was a cozy space, with a stone fireplace, walls lined with books, and a large desk positioned to take advantage of the natural light from 2 windows. Please sit, he said, gesturing to one of 2 leather armchairs near the hearth. Nora sat, noting the titles on the nearest bookshelf, works of history, animal husbandry, and to her surprise, several volumes of poetry, including Wordsworth. Isaac followed her gaze. My mother's, he explained. She loved poetry, insisted that I learn to appreciate it as well. My father would have liked her, Nora said with a small smile. Isaac settled into the other chair. I wanted to speak with you privately about your situation, he began. I meant what I said about you being welcome to stay, but I understand it puts you in an awkward position. It does, Nora agreed. I'm grateful for your kindness, but I can't be a charity case. I need to make my own way. And I respect that. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. But I also need to be honest with you. When I sent for a bride, it wasn't just for companionship. This ranch needs a woman's touch, someone who can manage the household and help me build something that will last. Mrs. Hollister is a treasure, but she's talking of retiring to live with her daughter in Oregon. I see, Nora said cautiously, not entirely sure where he was leading. What I'm trying to say, perhaps poorly, is that I've been impressed by you, Nora Randall. Your courage in traveling alone across the country. Your willingness to help with the mare. Your obvious love for the land and the animals. In just 3 days, you've shown more understanding of ranch life than I expected from any mail-order bride. Nora felt her cheeks warm at his praise. That's very kind of you to say. It's not kindness, just truth. He took a deep breath. I know this is sudden, and I know you came west to marry another man. But sometimes God has other plans than the ones we make for ourselves. Her heart began to beat faster. Surely he wasn't suggesting. Miss Randall, Nora, would you consider staying here, not as an employee, but as my wife? As I said, I know it's sudden, and I don't expect an immediate answer. We could have a longer engagement if you prefer, time to get to know each other better. But I believe we could build a good life together here. Of all the possible propositions, this was the one Nora had least expected. Yet as he spoke, she realized it wasn't entirely unwelcome. In their brief acquaintance, she'd come to respect Isaac Westbrook, his integrity, his compassion, his quiet strength. And she couldn't deny the flutter in her heart when he smiled at her, or the sense of rightness she'd felt riding beside him. Mr. Westbrook, Isaac, please. Isaac, she amended. This is indeed sudden. I came west prepared to marry a man I knew only through letters, it's true. But that arrangement had developed over months of correspondence. We've known each other only days. I understand, he said, disappointment evident in his voice. It was presumptuous of me to ask so soon. No, she said quickly, not presumptuous. Just unexpected. I need time to think, to pray about this. Hope rekindled in his eyes. Of course, take all the time you need. My offer of employment still stands in the meantime, no strings attached. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. That night, sleep eluded Nora once again. She lay awake, turning Isaac's proposal over in her mind. Was it possible to know so quickly that someone might be right for you? She'd thought William Fletcher was her future, based on nothing more than carefully composed letters. Yet in just 3 days, Isaac Westbrook had shown her more of his true character than Fletcher had in months of correspondence. She thought of how natural it had felt to work alongside Isaac with the mare and foal, the easy conversation they'd shared on their rides, the respect he'd shown for her opinions and abilities. She thought of the ranch itself, so much like the home she'd loved and lost in her youth. And she thought of the way her heart had raced when he'd helped her from his horse, his hands strong and gentle at her waist. Was this God's plan all along? To bring her west, not to marry William Fletcher, but to find Isaac Westbrook instead? Lord, she whispered into the darkness, I don't know if this is your will, but I feel your hand in it. Guide me to the right decision. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Nora dressed carefully in her best day dress, a simple but well-made garment of deep green that her mother had sewn for her before she died. She arranged her hair with extra care, securing it with a tortoiseshell comb that had been her grandmother's. When she descended the stairs, Isaac was waiting in the main room. He stood as she entered, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of her. Good morning, he said, his voice warm. Good morning, she replied. I wondered if we might talk privately? Of course. He led her to his study, closing the door behind them. You've made a decision? I have. Nora took a deep breath. Before I tell you, I need to ask you something. Anything. Why me? You don't know me, not really. Is it just that I was here, convenient, when Miss Thompson disappointed you? Isaac shook his head firmly. No, it's because in 3 days, you've shown me more of who you really are than Miss Thompson did in months of letters. I've seen your compassion for animals, your willingness to work hard, your adaptability to unexpected circumstances. I've enjoyed our conversations more than any I can remember in recent years. He stepped closer, his blue eyes intent. I'm not a man given to rash decisions, Nora. I've built this ranch carefully, methodically, over years. But sometimes, rarely, something happens that feels like divine intervention. Getting off at the wrong station might have been a mistake, but I don't think your coming here was one. His words resonated with her own thoughts, her own prayers. I feel the same way, she admitted. I came west prepared to build a life with a stranger. William Fletcher and I had an agreement, nothing more. No affection, no real knowledge of each other beyond what could be contained in formal letters. She looked up at him, finding the courage to continue. In 3 days, I've come to know you better than I knew him in 3 months. I've seen your kindness, your integrity, the respect you show to those who work for you. I've felt at home here in a way I haven't since my father died. Isaac's expression softened. Are you saying yes? I'm saying I'd like to try, Nora clarified. Not a hasty wedding, but a proper courtship. Time to be certain for both our sakes. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. I'd like nothing better, he said, taking her hands in his. We'll take all the time you need. And in the meantime, I'd like to accept your offer of employment. I want to contribute, to earn my keep while we come to know each other better. Agreed, though I warn you that Mrs. Hollister may spoil you terribly once she hears the news. Nora laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. I think I can endure it. Isaac raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Thank you, Nora Randall, for getting off at the wrong station. I'm beginning to think it was exactly the right one, she replied softly. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Nora's life. True to her word, she worked alongside Mrs. Hollister, learning to manage the large household and adding her own touches to make the ranch house even more of a home. In the mornings, she often accompanied Isaac to check on the horses, developing a special bond with the mare, now called Mercy, and her growing foal. Isaac proved to be a patient teacher, showing her the operations of the ranch, introducing her to the hands and their families, even teaching her to drive the buckboard so she could make trips to town when necessary. Their courtship progressed naturally, with evenings spent reading aloud by the fire, Sunday rides to explore the farthest reaches of the ranch, and conversations that stretched long into the night as they discovered their shared values and complementary differences. By the time autumn painted the aspen groves gold and crimson, Nora knew with certainty that Isaac Westbrook was the man God had intended for her all along. The day he formally proposed, dropping to one knee beside the creek where they'd stopped during a ride, she accepted without hesitation. They were married in early November, with Mrs. Hollister weeping happily, Ezra standing as best man, and the ranch hands and their families filling the small church in town. As Isaac slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Nora silently thanked God for guiding her steps, and for the mistake that had brought her to the right man after all. Later that evening, standing on the porch of what was now truly her home, she leaned against her husband's solid shoulder and gazed up at the stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. "Happy?" Isaac asked, his arm warm around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible," Nora replied honestly. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "I never really believed in divine intervention before. But how else can we explain you getting off at the wrong station on the very day my third mail order bride decided not to come?" Nora smiled, remembering her prayers in the darkest moments of confusion and fear. "God had other plans," she said simply. "Better ones than either of us could have imagined." Isaac turned her gently in his arms, his eyes reflecting the love that had grown between them over the past months. "I thank him every day for bringing you to me," he said softly. "And I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret stepping off that train at the wrong station." "The right station," Nora corrected, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Exactly where I was meant to be all along." As the years passed, the story of how Nora had arrived at Elk Valley Ranch became a family favorite, told and retold to their children and eventually their grandchildren. The ranch prospered under their joint care, expanding to become one of the most respected operations in the territory. Mercy and Triumph became the foundation of a line of fine horses that the Westbrook Ranch became known for, alongside their cattle. And every year, on the anniversary of the day Nora stepped off the train at Clearwater Junction, Isaac would present her with a small gift, a reminder of the mistake that had proven to be the greatest blessing of both their lives. For as Nora often said, when looking back on that rainy day in 1882, sometimes God's most perfect plans look like wrong turns to human eyes. But in the end, she had found exactly what she'd traveled west seeking, not just a husband, but a true partner, a loving home, and the life she was always meant to live.